Hello, everyone, and thank you for checking out this speech. Today, I just want to go over a leading public health concern that is on the rise, which is suicide. I'm just going to go over a few things such as data, figures, stigma, and what our country is doing in response to suicide. The CDC has been working hand in hand with our states. And so I just also want you to keep in mind that I come from a government background, so I actually see these rates every day and I'm working with the figures. And so this was just a topic that I really think needs more attention and really needs overall more discussion. But suicide is something that really nobody needs to be explained. It's something we all know, understand, but I also want to point out that we all see and interpret it differently. You may be directly impacted, you may be indirectly impacted, but somehow, some way you probably know someone who has had troubles with suicidal ideation, or maybe just overall is depressed and needs help. And that's great, but I just want to be as objective as possible in this video, just sort of laying out what is happening. So moving on to the data. So Alaska is known for having really high suicide rates. Typically, you can see the rates being anywhere from 3 to 4 times higher what you'd see as the nation average. There were 1,103 suicides, which makes up about 70% of overall violent deaths that occurred in Alaska. Alaska's suicide rate for men between the ages of 20 and 24 is almost the highest, right next to Alaska Native American Indian men, who have the highest mortality rate when it comes to suicides. Another thing to keep in mind is that rural populations are completely different than what you'd see in urban cities, because their rates are much, much higher. For various number of reasons, but recently we've seen an uptick, especially in urban cities. So another thing that is a really big topic of discussion is the stigma behind suicide. Suicide is an act of violence that someone does unto themselves with a fatal outcome. That's just what it is. Like I said, everyone interprets what suicide is differently. But I just want to really open up the floor to talking about how you should never be afraid to reach out to a loved one, especially if you think that they are either depressed or have freely expressed suicidal ideation. Everyone has their own opinion about the topic, but really you reaching out to them could mean the difference between life and death. About 97% of all the suicides that have taken place in the state of Alaska were documented to have precipitating circumstances, things like mental health issues, substance abuse, criminal legal problems, or problems in their workplace. Maybe someone who got laid off from their job. That person has a significantly higher chance of committing the act of suicide. And sometimes all it really takes is opening up and talking to someone. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a family member, but letting people know about how serious of an issue this is becoming can seriously make all the difference in the world. Another thing I want to talk about is, like I said, I come from a government background. I work with injury prevention for the state of Alaska in the section of epidemiology. And something that I can't emphasize enough, and state employees get a bad rap sometimes, overpaid, underworked, etc. But there have been a huge amount of effort provided by the CDC, local and state law enforcement, and just overall public health experts in order to push the conversation forward, we know what suicide is. We can kind of understand why people are doing it, but how are we going to prevent it? Every single year, the suicide rate seems to be going up more and more. And since 2002, when the CDC created a program called the National Violent Death Reporting System, they have been documenting cases of suicide in ways you can't imagine. For instance, in 2015, there was something called the Toxicology Project of Alaska, in which we started actually testing the victims of suicides toxicology reports to find out if there were substances involved, if they could have been introduced to some kind of chemical, and so on and so forth. But at this point, we collect documents such as a medical examiner report, police report, anything from media, really, death certificates, and, like I said, toxicology reports. So we're now able to characterize these deaths a lot better than we were in the past. But in conclusion, I just hope that I was able to help inform you on the bigger picture of what's occurring in our state, and maybe this information can help you to help someone else who may be affected by suicide. Just keep in mind that, there is always help out there. There's avenues that you can take if you know someone. There's a suicide helpline where you can get access to a professional counselor that can help advise you on alternate routes, because, that one conversation could really change a life. Thank you for watching the video.